Already. New paddock on my wrist, yeah. White diamond in the gang, yeah. Got going to go get a mink, yeah. New finger ring sit like a sin, yeah. You a bad, then we can link. Hit the shower, you might stay.
Guys, I am back in a new location. This time I'm actually in my parents' office since my bedroom is a mess right now. But anyway, it's just a bit of a forward right before I get into this vlog revision and the details of it. I'd just like to say this is probably going to be one of my shorter vlog revisions, given I did get an 86% out of this topic 3 exam. I only ended up missing five points on this one, which is actually the best I've done on a test. And I think this is mostly due to the fact that I've studied for the most for the topic 3 exam than I have for any of the other exams that I've taken in IB Environmental Science this year. So I'm really proud of my grade for this. I would also like to just mention right before I get into this, I was a big fan of the take-home test. I feel like part of being in a classroom with a lot of people around you and having everyone sometimes talking or people finishing before you or that 45-minute time limit, I feel like it really detracts from your being able to learn. I feel like here I had a lot more time to be able to think about stuff. Also, I have really messy handwriting and my hand gets sore easily. So being able to type and not having my hands get sore after just a couple minutes of writing was very nice for me. It also just made me be able to focus more on the test and do better and and show that I learned the material more better. So I would enjoy more of those in the future. But either way, let's just get into the vlog revision. We'll try to make this as quick as possible. Okay, so category 1 of the IB environmental science test was essentially talking about basically we were able to pick 4 questions which were all talking about topic 3 stuff such as evolution, isolation, natural selection, endangered species, flagship species, etc., etc. The questions I ended up choosing for this portion of the test were questions 2, 3, 4, and 6. So I guess we'll start with question number 2 first. So question number 2 asked to distinguish between the concept of a charismatic flagship species and a keystone species using name examples. This one is pretty easy. We went over this a lot in class. I know that keystone species are essentially ones that can only be found in a specific area and is necessary to the structure of an ecosystem. This could be an example of like a wolf in Yellowstone, which is exactly what I used for this test. A flagship species is something that is not necessarily necessary to an ecosystem, but it's something that like draws in a lot of money for conservation efforts. Just like the World Wildlife Fund used pandas. So that was pretty easy. We covered this a lot in class. This is one of the earlier subtopics for this topic. So I felt like I did good on this. So I got the 2 points for naming the species and providing the example of it and providing the definition of them. And so for that, I felt pretty strong about that question, and I'm glad I got full points on it. Okay, so question number 3 was essentially asking us to identify 4 reasons for why the genetic diversity of a population may change over time. Now, genetic diversity and speciation and mutation is all stuff that essentially we've literally been learning since freshman year in biology, even almost as far back as 7th grade biology. So I felt I was pretty familiar with this, even before we started learning it in IB Environmental Science. I feel like we also covered this a lot in class, and it was something that's very prevalent throughout the ed puzzles and the perusals for this topic. So I felt like I understood this relatively well. There's a lot of different answers you could put for why genetic diversity may have occurred. I believe the ones I put on the text were just essentially mutation, genetic bottleneck, which occurs after a natural disaster / catastrophe. I also think I put random mutation, such as just a rare genetic mutation that happens, and finally just natural selection, preferring a specific trait over another, just leads to more genetic drift. And so those were all ones that were on the mark scheme. There's a lot more I could have touched upon, but those were the 4 I picked off the top of my mind. Obviously, this was something that I felt very comfortable with. I felt I've learned this. I'd even gotten this idea down, I feel like, in freshman biology. But either way, I'm glad that I ended up getting full points back on this, because I feel I really understood that even when I was taking the test. So question number 4, I didn't exactly do too strongly on. It was essentially saying to outline how global rates of extinction have changed over time. And so there was multiple parts of this one. The first part obviously was just explaining something that everyone knows. Everyone knows. We've covered this in class. I knew the fact that obviously the global extinction rates are like, there's a background rate. Like every year, I think something like 1,000 species go extinct or something. But now it's increased like 10,000 times that number. So more and more species are going extinct every day, essentially. So everyone knew that one, and I got a point for that answer. And I also got a point for alluding to the fact that there was human interaction that caused this. But I think the problem is that when the mark schemes in the IB test are asking outline, they are wanting more responses, and this should have been obvious to me given the fact that this question is literally worth 4 points. I should have assumed 4 reasons. I feel like the problem with this one is not that I didn't know it. I mean, I could have listed carbon dioxide rates are increasing. I could have as well listed the fact that waste is increasing, as well as hunting and poaching has been increasing over the past years. I just didn't think to write that. I feel like that's more of an error just on me not thinking to write it. I feel like I knew the information ahead of time. It was just me not thinking to write that on the test. And I guess that's something I should get better at, just not understating stuff and assuming that I already covered something when taking the IB Environmental Science test. So definitely something I'll look forward to in the past. I definitely feel like this was a question I could have gotten full points on it, but I'm okay with the 2 out of 4 points I got on it, given the fact that it was my fault. So the final question in category 1 was question number 6, which is essentially asking, outline the reasons why tropical rainforests should be conserved. My answer for this was rather short, but I believe I ended up getting full points back on this. I touched on the 4 reasons which came to the top of my mind. Now, this was more stuff that I ended up learning, I believe, in topic 3.2 or 3.3, which I really took to heart. Essentially, the rainforest I had always known for a long time 2 things about them. Essentially, they provide food and medicine, as well as they provide oxygen. Those were 2 of the things I put. Those were 2 of the things that were also right. That was pretty much prior knowledge that came into effect on that question. But some stuff I didn't know, especially some of the stuff we talked about in topic 4 related back to this, such as stabilizing the hydrological cycle. That was something that we had learned in that topic, as well as the idea of biological hotspots or biodiversity hotspots. Obviously, tropical rainforests are biodiversity hotspots. I touched on that, and given the fact that they get such an amount of given that they get such an amount of water, I also capitalized on the fact that they obviously stabilize the hydrological cycle. All 4 of those I put in that answer, and I'm glad I got full points back. Again, this was another one where I could have put essentially a vast majority, a myriad of different answers that all go along the lines. I could have talked about essentially filtering air or a carbon sink, but I didn't end up putting those. The ones I put were completely right, and I feel like combining prior knowledge and stuff we learned in this topic, I'm glad that I got full points back for this one. So for the questions in category 2, essentially, I chose questions 1 and 4. Question 1 was asking for a named endangered species, discuss why it is endangered and why it should be conserved. Now, I ended up getting 9 points for this question, and I'm rather proud about this. I ended up choosing the green sea turtles. I've known about sea turtles. They're on Disney Channel. They get advertised exactly what is happening to them. I provided a lot of examples for why they need to be conserved. Through plastic waste, where they end up swallowing the plastic or getting choked. Oil spills also affect the green sea turtles. But then I also mentioned essentially the fact for why it is important that we protect it, because it helps its ecosystem. It also eats a lot of kelp grass and seagrass, which many fish rely to live on. Like all life on Earth, everything has a purpose in an ecosystem. But due to the fact that there's numerous human biological factors that are impacting the life of these sea turtles, they are getting endangered and on the brink of going extinct. I feel I answered this question pretty well. The main reason I think I might have been marked off points was mainly for the expression of ideas, and as well as the fact that there was a lot more stuff such as habitat degradation and habitat fermentation or outcompeted. Sorry, there was more options for stuff I could have put. I feel like I may have touched on sort of almost the bare minimum of stuff for why they're in the position that they are endangered. And so because of that, I may have been minused off that 1 point, but overall I felt like I knew what I was doing on that question. For question 4, it was asking, compare and contrast the role and activity of intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations in preserving ecosystems and biodiversity. Again, relatively simple. We talked about this a lot in class. We actually had the guy that's part of a NGO come in and talk about Tibet and his job and what he does for the environment and traveling the rainforest. So essentially, I mentioned how essentially NGOs are stuff like Greenpeace. They influence the government, but they aren't working with the government. The EPA, for example, is an intergovernmental organization, given the fact that it is working for the government. It has government funding. It is the ones that are producing laws and legislation, whereas non-government organizations are the ones that are lobbying the government to do such things and are kind of taking action into their own hands. I think I answered that fairly correctly. I only missed 1 point on this question again. May have been for expression of ideas or the fact that I didn't I didn't explain all the different ways that they provide education or data studies. I sort of provide the bare minimum and differences between them, but I still feel like I provide a lot. I think the main area for category 2, like, I think, just to summarize, I knew what was being asked and I did what they asked, just not to the extent of examples that they wanted. But I feel like none of it was an issue of me not knowing it, if that makes any sense. In conclusion, I do feel a lot better with my score. On this test, I'm happy I got an 86% and I only missed 5 points. I feel like topic 3 was one of the easiest topics for me to understand, just because a lot of it, as I'm sure you've mentioned multiple times in class with women, is basically exaggerated biology, just with an IB spin on it. So because of that, it was mostly easy for me to comprehend and to understand, and I feel like that showed on the test. There was very little stuff that I really had to think through my mind. The only areas where I faltered was just simply not providing enough examples, where obviously the IB test wanted more examples. That's definitely something, if there's one thing I've learned from this test, is when asking to outline or even compare it to contrast, just list all the examples in your mind, because for some of these tests, for some of these questions, especially question number 4, category 1, it's like, I knew some of the stuff they wanted me to put, I just didn't think it was necessary to put it. So if there's anything I learned from that, it's that. But I'm happy with my score. I'm hoping to reciprocate that score on the final that's coming up in the topic 4 exam, which I think is coming up. And I hope that you enjoyed this vlog revision. I feel like I have understood what I missed on this test and how I could do better in the future. Well, that's all for now. I'll see you later.